Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I'm Braden. This is Tim. This is Second Legacy, and thank you for stopping by. Today, we have got to talk about something amazing that just happened at the SCOTUS level. They decided to give the nightmare fuel everything for the gun controllers possible on Monday when they said, hey, we're going to accept this case. We're going to walk through it right now because this has some serious implications, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we're going to say a quick word from our sponsor, and then we are going to hit this. And the content today is brought to you by a sponsor, Ammo Squared. Now, this is such an interesting idea, guys. We're talking about retirement accounts for your ammo. It's a thing. This is something you guys definitely at least look at if you're interested.
So what's really cool about it is you can tell Ammo Squared what type of ammunition you want, and it'll automatically purchase that ammunition throughout the month. You can also sell the ammunition back if you don't want it, or you can just say, send it to me now, and they'll hold it for you. They'll store it for free, and they'll ship it to you whenever you request it. There's so many cool features about this service. You really need to check them out at ammosquared.com, and we want to thank them for sponsoring today's video.
All right, Tim, so we're going to be talking about FPC today. What's FPC stand for?
Frickin' punching commies. I love these guys.
That's right. America.
Follow them on X, Twitter, because
did that feel
yeah,
good? Did
we just need the Screaming Eagle, Doc.
Oh, there he is.
There's
that Screaming Eagle.
Yeah, FPC, they're great. If you follow them on X, they're probably the least politically correct gun rights advocacy group out there, and I love following them.
No, I think they take politically correct and politically incorrect, and they just go so far beyond the pale where it's just like, literally, well, this is a thing.
They fight fire with fire. Where the gun grabbers are nasty, vile people using filthy words and stuff. Well, they fight fire with fire, and it's fun to watch.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Well, speaking of fighting fire with fire, Tim, something happened that we've been saying for a while. The SCOTUS accepted the frames and receivers egregious action from the ATF to be taken up in October by the SCOTUS.
Isn't that crazy? And guys, just so you understand,
interesting.
It is so rare for the SCOTUS to take up a case.
Very.
I mean, like less than 3% of the cases that come before them, they even bring to the floor for a discussion and an ultimate vote by the justices. So this is,
and even less for guns.
And guns, they almost never want to talk about at the SCOTUS level. Throughout my entire life, the SCOTUS just would not hear gun cases. They didn't want to weigh in on it. But that's changed. And a lot of that is because of the appointments Trump made.
Yeah.
Right. So
yes,
this is the time for us to be fighting these battles, and FPC, GOA, and everybody else are taking these battles to the courts, and we're doing good so far.
They really are. We are doing pretty good. So just to give you an idea, remember, we talked about when this was all going down about a year ago when we started this channel, we were talking about the executive bureaucratic overreach as the main focal point of the problem, right? Like if they weren't passing anything through Congress, generally. They weren't doing any AR bans. They weren't doing mag bans. Nothing federal was really dropping. Now, the bipartisan act did in the Senate. That's a different thing. I'm talking about direct bans of things, right? So far, in the past 2.5 years, again, Tim just said something really important. They only accept less than 3% of all cases that are lobbied at them. And of those, they've accepted a lot of cases that either have to do with guns or executive bureaucracies overstepping their bounds. Yep. And by the way, that also affects guns because that's exactly what they've done through the Second Amendment infringements. That's exactly how they do it. So off the top of my head, Tim, and if I miss one of these, we're just kind of going ad hoc. So it started with West Virginia versus EPA. That was 2 years ago. That was around the exact same time as the Bruen decision. Of course, the Bruen decision was one. But the West Virginia versus EPA, they basically said, hey, you can't reclassify carbon dioxide as a toxin to give yourselves more power. Well, that's exactly what the ATF did for guns. They just redefined terms in order to get more power. It's what they did across all executive bureaucracies. So they got smoked on that one. The Bruen decision came down. They got smoked on that one, the gun controllers did. Then they accepted the Rahimi case a year later. They accepted the Chevron deference case, which is how they utilize all this power. And now they've accepted the Vanderstock case, which is frames and receivers.
Let's not,
guys, that's a lot.
Let's not forget, and this goes back several more years, but I still think it's important. They're big victories for us at the SCOTUS, which again, these are gun cases, which are very rare at the SCOTUS. We have McDonald, Heller, and you already mentioned Bruen. So those three pro-gun decisions have basically propelled us to the point where we can more effectively fight these attacks against our rights in the courts. Yes. Because between the three of them, they basically established that, yes, you have an individual right to keep and bear arms. And you have an individual right to carry those arms outside of your home to protect yourself and others. And so, and then we have the Bruin decision, which says, look, folks, if you're going to try to pass more gun control, you're going to have to look at the history and text of the American, country, that everything we've done from our founding
Right.
till present,
The history and tradition.
right.
And
You
text.
have to look at that before you pass new gun control, because the founders had something very specific in mind. And if you're trying to go against what they thought and believed, then it ain't going to fly with this court. And so that
Correct.
is critical to our future fights going forward, including this one, I believe.
Oh, I completely agree. The way that, if you are not familiar with how this works and you aren't following it incredibly tightly, if you look back from the last 20 to 30 years, think of it as a battlefield where two different groups have nothing really in between no man's land, and they're just lobbing things at each other to see what works, right? Then as it continues to go forward, we get more and more cases decided. The parties are basically getting closer and closer and closer to the final culmination of the battle, right? So Heller, the left was saying you can't have guns in your home. Well, Heller came out and said, oh, yeah, you can, put Cupcake. That's stupid. And then after that, the left said, well, then we can't carry guns in public because that's public space. That's not your home. And then the Bruins assumed said, yeah, you can, Cupcake. And so now it's just getting closer and closer to these battles where the ATF is basically saying we can redefine things and we can do whatever we want because we're the ATF. And we want to. So therefore, we're going to twist and manipulate it to get our control for the existing Biden administration. And again, the pistol brace rule, Tim, stuffed. Ghost gun or frame a receiver, stuffed, and then allowed while the entire litigation continued, and now it's going SCOTUS.
Yeah.
Dude, it's getting very narrow at the top of this pyramid.
And look at the connection between this case for frames and receivers and in previous cases that we're talking about with the EPA and stuff like that, which is called Chevron deference, right? These two are linked.
Correct.
Because what ATF has done here with the frames and receivers rule is an abuse of power using the Chevron deference decision from like the 1980s, yes. Right? So the courts have connected these two. They've already agreed. Well, they've already heard Chevron deference, and now they've taken on this case, which is a Chevron deference case as well.
And we'll see that in June, by the way, just so you guys are, if you're watching, we'll hear the decision on that in June.
And so this is really, to me, and maybe I'm reading the tea leaves wrong here, but this seems to indicate the fact that these two cases have been heard. One, they've already heard, and we're waiting for the decision. Now they've taken on this other one, which is related. It's telling me that they probably have a problem with Chevron.
Well, that's my whole point. That's my exact principle in what I just laid, like kind of the way that I just went. In the past 3 years, since we've had the new court, basically after Trump put in 3 people, it looks very much like they are going against all types of overreach in the executive branch that is outside the confines of Congress. So Congress does this thing in order to avoid tough votes where they would get in trouble and they may lose their jobs depending on how they vote. They basically just write very broad laws and they let the executive bureaucracies do all of it because they can't be voted out while they can still be voted back in Congress. So they've basically handed off and abdicated all of their responsibility over to an executive bureaucratic branch, which has just grown like a weed because Congress is enabling it. It's self-preservation for Congress and it's self-preservation for the executive branch.
Which is why Congress
has
never dealt with Chevron.
And cuts that? Correct. Exactly right. Because Congress doesn't want hard votes because that interrupts power. That's not good. That gives the choice to the people, whether they're happy or not happy.
Now we're on record for standing for something and we've upset our constituents. So let's just make it nebulous and hand it off to the regulating agency and say, well, we didn't do that. That was the agency.
Yeah, they did that. And frankly, I'm appalled that the ATF would do this. You want a really good case in point example? Here you go. What the ATF just did with redefining who's a federal dealer and changing all these gun show loopholes, as they call it. Well, Cornyn, the guy who actually made it possible, and one of his little cohorts, what's the guy from North Carolina? Tom Tillis, they came out and rants, just horrible, offensive, oh my gosh, conflagration. There we go. Consternation against this egregious abuse of power. You gave them the bullet, and then you got shocked when it went off at you. Dumb. It's so comical. It's just like, oh my goodness, they took away our archery and our outdoor resources. Yeah, no kidding, because you passed the law that let them do it. Well, I'm going to write a letter.
You do that, sweetie.
Oh, do that, because I think they don't know how to read.
They don't care. They'll have a staffer read it and throw it in the trash. Yeah.
But going back to the point, though. This is a big deal. This is a big one because it goes back to the same underlying root cause. Don't just look at it as frames and receivers. Look at it as the executive bureaucratic overreach, like Tim said, similar to Chevron deference. The court obviously wants to make a ruling on this whole approach to governing.
Yeah, they're going to set a precedent here. I think that's
curious.
what they're doing. That's what this seems to indicate to me.
Yes, I agree. And a little history on this. This was basically this was put forward for the stay to the Supreme Court, and 5-4 they said no, we're not going to stay it. We're going to let the litigation continue on. The people who sided with the liberal justices were Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts. So now those same people are going to have an actual ruling on this because they let the litigation continue. And this is where I think it's very interesting. They didn't keep the stay in place, so they allowed the ATF to continue to do it while the litigation continued. Well, now the litigation came up to them, and the majority voted to take the case up. That's a thing. That's not small potatoes.
No, but let's also point out the fact that the Supreme Court almost never issues injunctions or stays or anything like that. They let it work through the lower courts before they decide to intervene. They want to see what the lower courts are going to do. They don't want to step on the toes of their underlings in the lower courts. So it's not uncommon for them to not issue a stay or an injunction.
No, not at all. But that is important history to understand, that as they go through this, because this is wildly unconstitutional. Guys, they added new laws and infringed upon the entire population nationwide just by changing definitions that Congress didn't do.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, this is really egregious. It's the exact example of West Virginia versus EPA when they smoked the EPA already this year or last year. So, I mean, it's got shades of, someone's going to get a backhand. Now, I can't guarantee it, but it feels, like you said, it feels very potentially promising.
But think about this.
Was that ambiguous?
Our court systems work on precedents, right? Previous decisions. And that influences future decisions pretty heavily. Doesn't always guarantee an outcome, but it usually has a pretty strong, it's weighted very heavily in their decision-making process. So look at this case and Chevron. If they decide both these cases in our favor, that's 2 cases of precedent. I mean, they're making a very strong statement here if that's the path they're going down. They're shutting the door and then putting a doorstop in front of it and saying, and we want to be clear here, you can't do this. That's what it looks like to me.
I completely agree. That is my initial, from the distance, not being inside the Supreme Court, not being a justice. That's my read as well. And if I was just to go out on a limb here and just kind of guess where they would likely be standing, I think you're going to see Alito go against the ATF. Clarence Thomas, I think, is a lock against the ATF. I think Gorsuch is an absolute lock against the ATF. Kavanaugh, I honestly don't know 100%. He in the Chevron case, when I was listening to it, it sounded like he was not digging that kind of approach. Amy Coney Barrett, I have no idea, and John Roberts is I will never put a confidence vote on him. So, I honestly don't know.
The wild card in all this. Roberts is the biggest problem.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
I just don't know. I think it's going to be a close decision. I bet you one conservative is going to side. It's going to be a 5-4. That's what I bet. I don't think this is going to be a 6-3.
No. The leftists are going to try to protect their nut for sure. That's just what they do. But
yeah. So I'm thinking 5-4. I don't know who's going where though.
Well, the only reason this is happening, Braden, is because the court's unbalanced.
Is it unbalanced?
It can only be in balance if the left has at least a 2-seat majority. Otherwise, it's wildly
That's true.
imbalanced.
Then it is imbalanced.
And we need to stack the court to rebalance it so the left has control. Yeah.
Man, you're always here to bring me back to
citizen. Yeah. It's a tough road to walk, but, I'm very pragmatic. So
someone's got to do it. Well, I think we covered that. I think that's a pretty cool little angle on that. I think it's a good approach. Something definitely to see, because we're hearing this in October, Tim, right before the election.
Just keep in mind, guys, this is a big one because basically they're saying every part in your firearm is a gun. And so every part has to be serialized. And if you want to go buy a new Barstow barrel from Midway or Brownells or whomever you like to buy parts from, they can't sell it to you anymore. So, because it's a gun. Well, they can sell it to you, but you have to do a 4473 form for your new Apex drop-in trigger. Yeah. So let's hope it goes our way. It should. Thanks for watching Second Legacy, and we'll talk to you guys soon.